The village of Eldermere lay hidden between rolling mist-covered hills, cradled by ancient trees and bathed in the soft glow of lanterns that flickered against the night breeze. A place of simple lives and quiet routines, where children played near the Velmara River, and the elders spoke in hushed tones of things long past. But there was one thing they never spoke of after dark: the vanished bridge. It had once stood as a proud link between the village and the shadowed forest beyond. It was sturdy, built of blackened stone, its foundation strong enough to withstand centuries of storms. But then, on a night when the moon hid behind thick clouds, it disappeared. Not a single stone remained. The river flowed undisturbed, its waters unbroken, as if the bridge had never been there at all. The villagers awoke to a world that had changed overnight, and though some sought answers, all they found were whispers in the wind and an eerie stillness in the air. No one dared cross the river now. No one dared to ask why. But Leoric was different. He had grown up with the legend, hearing it in fragments from drunken old men who let their guard slip by the fire, or from travellers who spoke of the vanished bridge as if it were a myth. Yet no one had seen it return. No one had ever claimed to witness it reappear, until now. Leoric had walked the lonely path to the river, feeling the air grow colder with every step. The usual sounds of the forest, the chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves, had vanished. And then, as if called by the very thing he sought, the bridge emerged from the mist. It was no longer the grand structure described in the old stories. This one looked wrong. The stones were cracked, their surfaces covered in twisting vines that seemed to pulse, as if something lived beneath them. The air around it was thick, heavy, as though the space itself resisted his presence. And standing at its center was a cloaked figure. The sight of it made Leoric's breath hitch. It was motionless, yet the darkness around it seemed to move, shifting like tendrils of shadow curling in the night air. You should not have come. The words slid through the silence, neither spoken aloud nor whispered, but simply appearing in his mind. Leoric swallowed, but his throat felt dry. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely steady. The figure did not answer at first. Instead, it raised a hand, and the mist around them began to swirl. The river darkened. The stars overhead seemed to blur, and then the truth was revealed. Beyond the bridge, where there should have been land, there was instead a void, an abyss, stretching endlessly, filled with shadows that moved without form. They twisted, clawed at the edges of the bridge, writhing as if they sensed him. They had no faces, no eyes, yet Leoric felt their gaze pressing against him, watching, waiting. The bridge was not a passage between lands, the figure finally said, its voice both distant and ancient. It was a door. Leoric felt something deep within him tremble. He had expected an explanation, an earthquake, a forgotten flood, something logical. But this was beyond understanding. They wait, beyond the veil. The figure continued, gesturing toward the abyss. They were never meant to cross. The bridge was their prison, until it was broken. The realization struck him like a thunderclap. Something had been sealed away, and when the bridge had vanished, so had its chains. "You must leave," the figure warned, "before they notice you." Leoric hesitated. His mind screamed for him to turn and run, but his body remained frozen. He could feel it now. A pull, something in that darkness beyond the bridge, stretching toward him like unseen fingers. The shadowed forms shifted. For the first time, they began to move toward him. A voice, not like the Guardian's, But something deeper, something hollow and unearthly, slithered through the air. He sees us. Leoric felt his blood turn cold. The figure on the bridge suddenly moved, stepping between him and the abyss. The air rippled as if unseen forces were clashing, and the figure's voice turned sharp. "Go!" Leoric staggered backward. His legs finally obeyed, and he turned. He ran. The whispers behind him grew louder. The mist swirled violently, and the air itself felt like it was closing in. He didn't dare look back, didn't dare slow down, even as his lungs burned and his heart pounded against his ribs. When he finally reached the village, everything was normal. The river flowed peacefully, undisturbed. The stars twinkled in the sky as if they had never blurred. There was no mist, no bridge, no sign that anything had happened at all. But Leoric knew the truth. That night, he lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind refusing to quiet. He had seen something that no man was meant to see, and though he was safe within the village walls, a terrible thought crept into his mind. What if they had seen him too? What if they had seen him too? Days passed, then weeks. The village remained the same, untouched by whatever horrors lurked beyond the river. Slowly, Leoric convinced himself that it had ended, that he had escaped, until, one night, he heard it again. A whisper, soft, distant. "He sees us." Leoric bolted upright in bed, his chest tight with fear. The room was dark, the silence too perfect. He turned toward the window, half expecting to see mist creeping through the streets. But there was nothing. Then, just as he began to calm his breathing, he noticed something. The air in his room was colder than it should have been. And beneath the wind outside, beneath the rustling leaves and the distant call of an owl, he could hear it, the sound of flowing water, the river, and a voice, barely more than a breath. "The bridge is waiting." Leoric squeezed his eyes shut. He had left it behind. He had done as the figure told him. Hadn't he? But some doors, once opened, never truly close, and some bridges are meant to stay vanished.